You're listening to Uncoupled and Unfiltered, the show for people smart enough to get out of the wrong relationship and bold enough to do it without losing their damn minds. Hosted by Ksenia Mensch, a divorce strategist and straight-talking badass, this podcast is your no-fluff, no-shame, take-control guide to surviving litigated divorce with clarity, guts, and zero regrets. Let's get into it. Here's Ksenia.
Hi, and welcome back to Uncoupled and Unfiltered, where we talk all things divorce, emotional turmoil, things you should know when going through it, resources available to you, and how to rebuild yourself after. Today, we're exploring a topic that touches both law and faith, the difference between divorce and Catholic annulment. For many, this isn't just a legal or spiritual question. It's deeply personal and emotional. Sometimes it comes from a place of manipulation and desire to hurt your former spouse. So if you ever wondered why some people need both a divorce and an annulment, or why an annulment does not erase the fact that a marriage happened, you're not alone. These processes can feel confusing, contradictory, and frequently just painful. But before I dive into that, if you like the content I'm creating and if you like listening to what I'm sharing, please connect with me, follow, reach out to me at Ksenia at thriveagaindivorcecoaching.com, or please visit my website, www.thriveagaindivorcecoaching.com, and schedule a call with me and see what I can do to help you or your friends. So now let's get back into the divorce versus annulment. So let's first talk about the divorce. Legally, divorce ends a marriage in the eyes of the state. It's about property, finances, and often custody of children. Depending on your jurisdiction, grounds usually are irreconcilable differences. But again, every state is different, so your attorney will help you figure that one out. Divorce creates legal closure. Once finalized, you are free to remarry legally, and responsibilities and rights are clearly defined. But legally, final doesn't mean emotionally simple. Divorce often triggers a slew of emotions. We know grief, relief, anger, guilt, sometimes happiness. Depends where you are on the spectrum of this divorce transition. And even if the decision is mutual, psychological research shows that divorce can increase stress and prolong emotional recovery. And what I've also heard, and I can actually confirm that, divorce sometimes feels worse than losing somebody in your life, like they passed away. Because when somebody passed away, it's a one-time event and you deal with the trauma accordingly. You lived it once and now you learn to live with a hollow in your heart and you live without that person in your life anymore. Divorce is a little different. The person is still there. That person is just no longer in your life. And it feels sometimes you get re-traumatized over and over again. And again, depending where you are on your emotional spectrum, if you're still grieving the person, seeing the person, if you're sharing kids, is very, very difficult because you always wonder, what if? How come I didn't do more to save the marriage? Or if you are happy, you get triggered because you're annoyed. Oh my gosh, when is this going to end? When do I no longer have to see that person? So it's different, but the idea is the person is present and it is more challenging to move on because it feels like the scab keeps getting scratched over and over again. So divorce, if you look at it from a big perspective, it's not just paperwork. You're ending a life chapter. Now let's talk about annulment. Catholic annulment, and I want to talk about Catholic annulment because I know this one better and I did some research on it, is very different. The church does not consider annulment a Catholic divorce. A lot of people like to pretend like, oh, it's just a divorce. No, it's annulment. It's a declaration that a valid sacramental marriage never existed. And what does it mean? So grounds to annul a Catholic marriage include lack of consent, incapacity to fulfill marital obligations, or deceit. In other words, annulment examines whether sacramental bond was ever truly present from the beginning of the marriage. Emotionally, annulment can feel just as heavy, or even actually heavier than divorce. Because in some instances, like I said at the very beginning, annulment doesn't mean the marriage never existed, but it can feel like that. It can feel like, especially if you are not the one who are set it in motion, it can feel like you're being erased from their lives completely, like you never existed. That's not the case. So annulment can feel like betrayal or rejection. And like I said, especially if you're on the receiving end, you may feel used, as though your shared history is being questioned or invalidated. Even when annulment is legitimate, it can bring grief, confusion, and anger because it asks you to re-examine your relationship through a lens that may feel distancing and very judgmental. And I want to make it clear it's okay to feel all those emotions. And I know you've heard it millions of times. Of course, it's okay to feel it. But I want to specify anything you feel through this process is valid and normal. So instead of judging yourself, you're already feeling judged probably by the process itself. Do not judge yourself. Just accept it what it is, feel what you need to feel, and let go. A critical legal note, and I want to make sure that my listeners know it so they don't fall into the trap if they're dealing with a high conflict, soon to be ex spouse. A Catholic annulment cannot be demanded as a part of a civil divorce settlement. It is entirely separate from legal proceedings. Courts cannot require an annulment or enforce it as a part of property division, custody, or support arrangements. I worked with one couple when he demanded annulment to be a part of settlement, and the husband was refusing to sign the settlement unless the wife agreed to Catholic annulment. And I advised her it's not possible. The court does not have jurisdiction. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, just know it's your high conflict spouse maybe throwing a tantrum, but they cannot force you to agree to anything, and courts cannot force you to agree to it. So just know when it's a game. Let's compare divorce and annulment real quick. So first, let's compare legal effect. Divorce ends marriage legally. So marriage existed, it ended. Annulment, no legal effect on civil marriage. So what it means, you can still be married through church, but legally you are divorced. Or the opposite, you are married legally, but in church you are not married. Religious effect. Church may still consider marriage valid when it comes to divorce. What I just said. When it comes to annulment, it declares marriage invalid sacramentally, which means again, the marriage was flawed from the beginning. Grounds for divorce, irreconcilable differences. That word is so damn difficult for me to pronounce. But just bear with me. Irreconcilable differences. In annulment, like I said, there were a few grounds: lack of consent, incapacity, deceit. Remarriage, allowed legally when you're divorced. Annulment, allowed in church if annulment is granted. If annulment is not granted, your first marriage is considered one and only. So some people need both. And I want, again, my listeners to know that a divorce for legal closure and an annulment for spiritual closure. Emotionally, this dual process can feel like a tug of war. One hand says, you're free, while other says, was this ever valid? And like I said, it's natural to feel grief, relief, guilt, shame, and trying to reconcile these two realities. But as I mentioned before, don't judge yourself. Allow yourself to feel that, and just when you're ready, move on. Since I work with high conflict couples, you know what? I wouldn't say high conflict couples. Since I work with people going through high conflict divorces, with women going through high conflict divorces, I want to talk about high conflict situation and manipulation when it comes to annulment. Sometimes the process is complicated by the people involved, right? High conflict personalities or those with narcissistic tendencies may pursue an annulment not for genuine spiritual reasons, but to protect their reputation, shift blame, and save their face. If you're on the receiving end of this, the annulment can feel like a weapon used to manipulate perception, rewrite history, or cast you as the problem. And it's going to be a very subtle way. It's going to be, oh, you see, it's even church agrees with me, so it wasn't me. Emotionally, this can feel like betrayal or rejection on top of grief from divorce itself. So your emotions are compounded and it's challenging. I hear you, I understand. Research shows high conflict interactions elevate stress, they prolong emotional recovery. And recovery can take years because, like I said, if you are continuing to interact with your ex because of children and the ex's behavior keeps escalating, you cannot recover when you're still in this active toxic pattern. So, in these situations, it's crucial you focus on your own clarity and your own emotional well being, whatever it takes. Does it take you to go and shop? I heard that if you buy something new once a week, you feel happier. Hey, whatever works. Do you want to go and play pickleball with your friends? So do you want to go to the gym? Do you want to go walk on the beach? What keeps you grounded? What keeps you composed and poised in a high stress situations? Also, make sure you document the experiences, you seek legal and spiritual guidance, and remember, the process is about truth, not ego or control. And another thing to remember, even in Catholic Church, people, priests, bishops, who make a decision whether marriage was valid or invalid from their perspective, they're still human, and humans make mistakes. Maybe it shouldn't have been annulled, but it was. Just accept the truth and continue living your life, writing a new chapter. Let's clear up some common misconceptions about annulment. Like I said before, annulment is not a Catholic divorce. It does not recognize the marriage existed if the marriage is annulled. It does not undo the marriage. It just declares that it was sacramentally invalid from the beginning. Divorce, on the other hand, doesn't automatically free you spiritually. So there are people, for some people who a spiritual marriage is very important. Divorce is not the end of it. The church may still consider the marriage valid until an annulment is granted. Annulment does not erase memories, children, or emotional bonds. It's a spiritual declaration, not a reset button. And the final thing, Catholic annulment cannot be legally demanded or enforced as a part of a divorce settlement. And I cannot stress it enough because the client I was working with when she was going through it, it threw her for a spin. It threw her for a spin. So I want to make sure that if you ever have to face it, you know that's not the case. The key takeaway, divorce and annulment serve very different purposes. Legal closure versus spiritual clarity. Both carry emotional weight. Being on the receiving end of an annulment, especially in high conflict situations, can feel very difficult to go through. But it does not define your worth or the validity of your lived experience. So seek guidance, legal and spiritual. Focus on your own transition through this challenging period of your life. These processes are about truth, understanding, closure. And just know some people make it about their ego, but it's not about that. Thank you again for joining me on this episode. If this resonates, or if you know someone navigating divorce or annulment, I hope it offers some clarity and emotional support. And again, thank you for listening to Uncoupled and Unfiltered. And until next time, see ya.
That's it for this episode of Uncoupled and Unfiltered. If you're loving the raw truth and practical takeaways, do the badass thing and rate and review the show wherever you listen. It helps more good people find their way out of the chaos. And check the show notes. Yeah, we actually put some useful stuff in there. Resources, links, tools, go grab what you need. Until next time, don't settle, don't shrink, and don't look back.